wage, child labor laws, and overtime pay. Absenteeism is a big problem with employers that they have to deal with because we are, as employees, protected by things like the Americans Disability Act, the Family and Medicare Leave, and things like that. Overtime. So on the other hand, you have people who are working, 40 plus hours. Anytime you're working 40 plus hours, that is considered overtime, and you should be getting no less than your standard wage plus standard wage and a half, no less than that. Term of employment. These are things like how much you're making, your benefits, vacations, and things like that. Things that you should be going over with your employer when you first get the job to ensure that you're in agreement. Rest breaks and meal periods. Not every state is required to give rest breaks and meal periods. New Jersey does not require it. So if you have an employer that allows that, they actually don't have to. Certain states like California do that. Uniforms, protective clothing, and tools. Most jobs require you to wear a uniform. If you're a cop, you're required to have a gun on your holster for protection. If you're working in a restaurant, no slip shoes, and if you're working with chemicals, protective gloves, because you don't want to get hurt, and you and your employer should both be aware of that. Comfortable workplace. This is things like no sexual harassing and gender equality. You should be making the same amount of money. And affirmative action laws that Nicole is actually going to be touching a little bit more on. Child labor laws. So these laws ensure that children can work in a safe environment without ruining their well-being or getting in the way of their education. So they have these laws in place for children. Healthy environment. These include, inspections and things like that. Hazard-free zones and things like that. OSHA. So Mario's going to discuss a little bit more about OSHA, but I'm just going to briefly touch on it. This is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. That was, because of that act, the Occupational Safety and Health Association was created. What this organization does is it kind of helps, there's inspections in place and making sure that things are safe in the workplace, like, when you're working with toxic chemicals, that employees are kind of trained to be working with these things. Make sure that tools are working properly and the employees know how to use them. And a big part about this is like training. It all comes back to training and, the tools being safe. That's a big part of OSHA and what they do. So, you just want to make sure, you're wearing protective gear and that your employer is telling you the proper things to wear and the proper tools to work with and how to use them, because you don't want any injuries on the job. That can make for a big problem for both the employer and employee. Again, just, trying to be safe and making sure that, everyone is, feeling comfortable in the workplace and everyone is in good health, and there's child labor laws and stuff like that. That's the main thing about working conditions. That's actually me, so you can't really see in the picture, but at work I have to wear like no slip shoes so that we don't slip on the floors, and we're trained, to do certain things so that we don't hurt ourselves. We have a bunch of emergency exits and stuff like that in place, and we are trained to, exit the building properly. So that in case there's a fire, we can escape or an emergency. We also have fire extinguishers and stuff like that. As you can see, we have exit signs and things to kind of help not only the employees, but if anyone, that's coming into the restaurant, if there's an emergency, we were able to tell the people that go there, how to properly exit and stuff like that. And, all of our chefs have to be trained properly on, how to make the food and be careful with the knives and stuff like that, especially the ovens. So, you don't want, there was a chef that actually caught on fire a couple months ago. So, Nicole's gonna talk about ethical hiring and termination.
Hi, I'm Nicole. So Alyssa just talked to you about working conditions, and I'm going to touch upon ethical hiring and termination, and I'm also going to be talking about affirmative action and the pros and cons that come along with that. So I'm basically just going to reiterate how the hiring process is fair and termination has to be fair as well. So what is ethics? Ethics is a moral principle that affects how we act. The hiring process could be really different if we didn't incorporate ethics. The interviewers can just hire people based on if they like them or if they didn't like them. So to involve ethics, we base people on their qualifications and the resume for the job. So there's a lot of HR ethical situations, and some ethic issues are discrimination issues, sexual harassment, and unfair employment. And these have to be handled correctly, or else things are going to result in a lawsuit. And the law can get involved, and employees can file lawsuits if they're not treated very fairly. And on my picture, I have a couple lawsuits. So here's two corporations that have a positive ethical environment. And basically a good ethical environment leads to happy employees, and then happy employees leads to trust, and then that leads to really good work productivity. And people are really attracted to these kind of companies to work for them. So how do you hire fairly? You have to list the duties and the responsibilities of the job, and you have to know what qualifications and prereqs you're looking for. You can't prefer a specific age, race, or gender, and to prevent this, we can do the rubric like we did in class the other day, just to have a grading scale. So more fair hiring things, people tend to be drawn to people that are similar to them. So to prevent that, we can have another person interviewing, so they can have different opinions on the person being interviewed. And we're drawn to people that are like us because we think we can predict how they're going to act. So some laws for hiring. Before you hire someone, you have to take in a couple policies and laws. One of them is the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and that's basically saying you can't discriminate over people over 40. And then there's a Title VII of Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination because of race, religion, and gender. So another thing you have to worry about is affirmative action, which is basically, it focuses on employment and education. And so this basically was created because it targets women and minorities to ensure that they have a fair chance in the work environment. And President Lyndon Johnson was an advocate for this and signed an executive order in 1965. So some goals of affirmative action. Basically, the goal is to reduce the gap between whites and minorities, and basically affirmative action started in employment, and then it moved into educations and universities, and it did reduce the gap just a little bit. So people have different thoughts about affirmative action, and some positive thoughts are supporters say it's good that they reach out to the non-financially stable and unrepresented groups, and applications increased 50% because of this. And they're living a better life if they were to never have gotten an education, and people that were picked because of affirmative action are just better and live a better life. So some negative affirmative action points are that some people think it's a form of reverse discrimination, and they're basing decisions on race than educational abilities and achievements. People think it's lowering the minority standards to get accepted, and it takes away the chance for great students to be accepted into college. So here I have a little chart going on, basically to just show how the gap closed a little bit. So the blue line is for white, the green line is for black, the red line is for Hispanic, and then the yellow line is for Asian. So you can see how it's getting better. So how to terminate people fairly. So when you fire someone, you have to think that it's not only affecting the person you're firing, but also their family and the workers around them. So you have to be prepared for the company to still function without the employee, and you have to be looking for a replacement. And before you fire someone, you should review the handbook and ensure there's no employment at will or just cause policies. So before you fire someone, you also have to look at a couple laws in place. So one is the American Disabilities Act, which if you hired someone with a disability, are you accommodating to them, or are you helping them out? And then another one is the Title VII California Fair Employment Housing Act. So you have to give them a chance before they're even terminated. And some more laws to consider. If the employee you're going to fire is pregnant, they're entitled to 4 months to figure out arrangements and recover, and then also workers' compensation. If they're injured on the job, they can't be fired because that could lead to discrimination. And then what happens after termination? So basically you have to explain why you fired the person, or else that could lead to a lawsuit. And you also need to be prepared if the employee is going to file for unemployment, and you have to give them a final paycheck, and you should end on a good note. So from my personal experience, 2 years ago during the summer, I worked at Mantua Target, like 15 minutes down the road, and they're a very ethical company, which I talked about earlier in my presentation. They basically made me watch a video on sexual harassment, discrimination, and gave me the whole policy on ethics and all that kind of stuff. And they're a really actually good company to work for, because they always had incentives. Like when you're a cashier, if you sold a red card, they would give you a free Starbucks drink or free popcorn. So they're always trying to promote a good work atmosphere, and also in the break room, they were really friendly and always just trying to bring people up. So a recap of my presentation, I basically just talked about how to hire people fairly and some laws to consider with that. I also talked about affirmative action and the pros and cons people see with that. And then I also talked about how to terminate an employee fairly and what could happen afterwards. So that was my presentation. Next up is Alyssa, and she's going to be talking about equality in the workplace.
Hi, hello, my name is Alyssa. I'm going to talk about equality in the workplace, which is very important. Okay, equality in the workplace is really important. All companies should demonstrate equal employment opportunity, which is a condition where all individuals have an equal chance of employment regardless of their race, religion, disability, national origin, or sex. An important organization that deals with this is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is an agency of the federal government that was created by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The purpose of this organization is to interpret and enforce laws prohibiting any discrimination in the workplace. They investigate complaints about discrimination, they gather information, and they issue different guidelines, and they monitor companies' hiring practices. They have headquarters that are based in DC, and they carry out work throughout there. So if there's any issues in the workplace, this is who you go to. These are the different charges from the EEOC. The majority, as you can see, is race, sex, disability, and age. And then a few up there, religion, national origin, and color, but they're the biggest ones from the charges from the EEOC. Along with this, there's discrimination. There's 2 different types of discrimination in the workplace. These are disparate treatment, which is differing treatments of individuals based on individual sex, race, color, religion, national origin, age, or disability. And disparate impact, which is different. It's when employment practices are seemingly neutral, yet disproportionately